Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight, we're stepping into a story that most Americans have never even heard about. It's a story that unfolded on a single terrifying night in June of 1781. Now, by this point, the American Revolution, here in Williamsburg, which had once been the capital of Virginia, had seen its government moved inland for safety. British raids, Loyalist uprisings, and Cornwallis's march had made the eastern part of Virginia far too dangerous. So the governor, Thomas Jefferson at the time, along with the entire Virginia legislature, had fled to Charlottesville, near where Thomas Jefferson lived, and they believed that they were going to be out of harm's way. But they were wrong. On June the 3rd in 1781, a young captain in the American forces by the name of Jack Jouett overheard a British plot that would have changed the destiny of Virginia and perhaps the entire Revolution. This is the story of a single rider who stood in the gap when everyone else was asleep. Jack Jouett, tall and strong, was known as a great frontier scout. He was passing nearby the fork in the road where sat the Cuckoo Tavern in Louisa County. Now that night under the pale moonlight, he heard the thunder of hooves approaching. He watched for a moment and stepped back into the shadows, and that's when he saw it. Tarleton's Dragoons. This was the hard-charging British cavalry unit led by the infamous Colonel Banastre Tarleton, a man feared across the South. Jouett listened as the officers spoke. They were riding to capture Thomas Jefferson and the entire Virginia legislature. If they succeeded, Virginia would be without a government, paralyzed in the middle of the war. And no one knew the danger was coming except Jack Jouett. So Jouett had no time to lose. He leapt onto his horse, he slapped the reins and plunged into the dark woods of Virginia. Now there were no open roads, no smooth paths, only rugged backcountry trails, fallen trees, and choking underbrush. The branches tore at his face, his horse stumbled over tree roots, but Jouett pressed on in the darkness of the night. The British had smooth roadways to travel on, but Jouett had only the wilderness. But he also had the lead and the courage to attempt the impossible. He rode that night across more than 40 miles of rough terrain with all the brambles tearing at his face, all in the dead of night. Historians say that the lash marks from the branches scarred his face for the rest of his life. His sacrifice was real. His mission was critical. Finally, Jouett burst into Charlottesville just before dawn. He went straight to the home where the legislatures lodged. Some had already risen for the morning, but others were still asleep. But he shouted the alarm, "The British cavalry are coming! Run for your lives!" Chaos erupted. Jefferson gathered his family and fled into the woods. Other lawmakers scattered in every direction. When Tarleton's cavalry thundered into town, they had missed most of the legislators by mere moments. Jouett's midnight ride had saved the government of Virginia. The Virginia legislature reconvened a few days later, first at Stanton, Virginia, and then at other smaller towns. So even though Virginia's government had fled Williamsburg months earlier, it was Jack Jouett's ride that kept the government alive. If Jefferson had been captured, if the legislators had been taken prisoner, Virginia may well have collapsed. And without Virginia, George Washington would have lost his single largest source of manpower and supplies for the Continental Army. One man, one night, one ride, and the Revolution survived. Jack Jouett did not ride because he was ordered to do so. He rode because he saw the need. He stood in the gap when no one else could. It's like Ezekiel 22:30 says, "And I sought for a man among them that should make up the hedge and stand in the gap before me for the land." And that man was Jack Jouett. Tired, wounded, alone, fighting darkness and danger, he stood in the gap. And God used his courage to protect a government and preserve a nation. History remembers Paul Revere, but Virginia had a midnight rider too. A man whose bravery helped to save a state and keep a revolution alive. Today, as we walk around here in Colonial Williamsburg, remember this: God often uses the unnoticed, the uncelebrated, and the unexpected to accomplish His greatest works.